From the Nettime archives, what do we think? A response to the Rosetto interview. 2. Nettime-L at desk.nl. Subject: Nettime, what do we think? Response to Rosetto interview. From newmedia at AOL.com by way of Pitt Schultz, pitt at contrib.de. Date: Saturday, 14th of December, 1996. 1:53:10 plus 100 GMT. Sender: owner-nettime-l at desk.nl. Folks, what do we think? Consider the following. Louis Rosetto is right. He speaks the truth. We, everyone he doesn't write about, don't have a clue. We are living in the 19th century. We are living in the past and don't understand the present or how we got here. As a result of not thinking clearly, we are powerless to stop Rosetto and his revolution. I happen to believe that this is exactly where we currently stand. We are in deep trouble, which is first and foremost intellectual. Or I could say that it is so deep that this critical situation is more properly called spiritual. We need to do some serious thinking and fast, or when a breakdown crisis hits, we will be swept away. Maybe we've got 5 years, maybe not. It could happen tomorrow. Here's the situation. Until H.G. Wells wrote Anticipations in 1902, no one was seriously thinking about the social implications of new technology. Not Marx, not Darwin, not Weber, not Freud, not Lenin, no one. Wells created a new way of thinking about the future. This new approach took transportation and communications technology as primary, and he tried to work out a new form of empire which would be based on understanding and controlling these technologies. He invented a new class to run this empire, what is now called the virtual class. He invented a new science of social control to propagandize the empire, which he named social psychology. He recognized the multinational corporations as the economic engine of this empire. He created a new religion to mobilize the masses to join this new empire, which we now refer to as the ecology movement. And he correctly understood that the fight to establish this new empire would be decisive for the epoch to come. No, he didn't know anything about computers or the internet. He didn't need to. He knew about humans and how they are organized. He knew about religion, culture, and the fundamental assumptions by which we all function. He understood power and conflict. He told us where we were going. Wired is simply the playing out of Wells's plans. Yet, who has any idea what Wells said or how it relates to today's unfolding events? Here's what Wells wrote in 1933, from the future historical standpoint of looking back from the vantage of the year 2116, in his last major fictional treatment of the World Revolution, which Rosetto now propagandizes for every month. The Shape of Things to Come, Book 3, The Plan for the Modern State Worked Out. The world was not able to unify before 1950 for a very simple reason. There was no comprehensive plan upon which it could unify. It was able to unify within another half-century because by that time the entire problem had been stated. The conditions of its solution were known, and a social class directly interested in the matter had differentiated out to achieve it. From a vague aspiration, the modern world state became a definite and so a realizable plan. What was he talking about in 1933? He had predicted World War II would start in 1940 and its utter reliance on aerial bombing of civilian populations, i.e. London, Dresden, and Hiroshima, or what came to be called strategic bombing. He had forecast that this war would officially end around 1950, but that global conflict would continue to threaten breakdown of social functions, i.e. the Cold War. He had foreseen that advances in the study of psychology would provide the tools to control populations. He termed this new field social psychology and called it the soul of the race. He was correct again, even though he did not name Tavistock/Levinites as its center. He created a fictional Gustave de Wint, whose 1942 work Social Nucleation presaged Levin's expansion of Gestalt theory into group brainwashing. He knew that a new class had to arise and that all previous forms of authority would need to step aside, what is now referred to as the virtual class because of its global and techno-ideological basis. and he focused on the year 2000s as the cutover between the old and the new, as did the entire sweep of futurists who followed him, right up to Wired. In the earlier essay format exposition of these ideas, The Open Conspiracy, 1928, he detailed the three bases for the religion which would replace Christianity and unify the masses behind the world revolution. These fundamental tenets are no growth, no war, and no nations. Think about it. We have all been raised within the confines of this religion, unless we're Chinese, that is. We cannot have war because the bomb would destroy us all, and we cannot have growth because it destroys the environment, and us along with it. So we cannot have nations which wage war and pursue growth. It's that simple. Wells understood how basic these matters turn out to be. Basic premises drive culture, which eventually drives politics. But his basic premises are all wrong. Do we understand any of this? Unless we uproot these basic premises, religious tenets, in our thinking, then we have no chance at all of winning against Rossetto and his army. Otherwise, it's just a game of 19th century foot-dragging, precisely as Rossetto says, until the big change comes. It's only a matter of time before a crisis big enough forces us to hit the reset button, and the institutions created in centuries now forgotten are dumped in the dustbin of history. Rossetto is representing tens of thousands of careers, thousands of books, and hundreds of conferences devoted to Wells's plan, even though most of those involved have no idea what Wells said. Postmodern, post-industrial, post-civilization, and post-reason, this army has been on the march since, just as Wells predicted, the 1950s. They have redefined all the important terms, starting with what it means to be human, and they are positioned to take control when crisis strikes. In the United States, Gore, Gingrich, and Pert are all members of this army. 2000 is still the target date for all the preparations to be in place. Norbert Wiener, the father of cybernetics, also knew what was coming. He refused to join the post-everything army. He knew the people leading the charge and he knew their plans. He laid it out very clearly in speech after speech in his 1950 book, The Human Use of Human Beings, which was gutted in 1954 when he had decided he had lost and covered his tracks. This is how he described the problem. Technology will inevitably automate human labor. There is no way to stop this process. First, we will devalue manual labor, and then it will undermine administrative and managerial labor. The result will be either of two outcomes. Either humans will be predominantly treated as cattle, or as fully capable humans. He understood that technological elites, he focused on spies, generals, and big science types, would try to take advantage of the situation and, in order to stay on top, favor policies which would bestialize and pacify the population. He proposed an alternative. Teach people to think, he said. This does not come naturally and requires all the energies of a society to achieve, he asserted. When the machines finally arrive to replace us, we will still be able to think, he proposed. He was right on all counts, but he didn't have a chance. His was not an easy message to get across, as you can imagine. A big, rotund egghead with a funny name who says that he's from MIT is here to tell us that we need to teach the steelworkers and the secretaries how to think. We'll meet with him out of courtesy, but we've got an American century to build and the Cold War and the commies to worry about. He tried to rally support, focusing particularly on Walter Reuther of the United Auto Workers, but was largely dismissed. Furthermore, most intellectuals, those who presumably knew how to think, were looking for patrons and or hoping to join the new elite. They had either tasted power from their role in the OSS during the war, or they had simply been convinced that the lesson of the war was that the people couldn't be trusted to think. After all, who was better educated than the Germans, and look what destruction that knowledge has wrought? Teach people to think? You must be kidding. We've got our own existential horrors to contemplate. As a result, nearly all social scientific, and more broadly intellectual, work after World War II has been directed at Wells's project to end Western civilization by undermining its premises and to construct the technocratic world empire on its ashes, which Wells first described. An open conspiracy with hundreds of independent centers, coordinated only by underlying strategic goals, differing on tactical priorities, has defined much of the past 50 years. It didn't matter what the details of the petty little arguments might be. All this was in the context of the coming of the machines. Rossetto was right. There has been no organized resistance. No one since Wiener has proposed an alternative to what we now refer to as the information age. We have all been saturated with the anti-human propaganda of those who claim we are advancing to a new age. We have been intellectually and spiritually fatted for our own slaughter. When I fingered the eco-movement as the most visible expression of Wells's new religion, Eric Davis took issue with me. But these are our allies, he said. No, I retorted. These are our enemies. They are the yang to Rossetto's yin. They are the other half of the tactical picture. Free markets and global limits. It was spelled out by Jaron Lanier over a year ago in his Spin editorial. The future is both stewards and extropians. The bizarre fusion described by Barbrook/Cameron operates at the tactical level because strategically there are no important distinctions. Freedom in the small and oligarchic control in the large. It's friendly fascism, or what Wells called liberal fascism. It's a new dark age. It's Wells's world state. It's McLuhan's apocalypse. Go back to Rossetto's interview. It's only a matter of which libertarians get into the magazine, he said. He wishes he had some left libertarians to write about, he confessed. But the left is so tired, he gleefully blurted. Watch the pages of Wired. The talent hunt is underway. If Rossetto survives the magazine's remake, he will embrace eco-limits. The folks at GBN know this. The optimism meme will be tempered with recognition of the destruction that really being out of control can bring. The ecology movement's fundamental reliance on Wells's primary tenet of no growth is the giveaway. This viewpoint is not our ally. All anti-growth movements feed into Wells's open conspiracy. Ecothink doesn't help. It's about to be harvested by Wired. Remember how the world looks to Rossetto and his army. There is the old way and the new way. Each has its left and right expressions. Wired is simply trying to represent all facets of the new way. But any old way point of view, left or right, is completely beneath interest. So futurists, Toffler from the 1960s, and technologists, Gilder, from the 1990s, are all welcome since they are the harbingers of the new. Toffler and his compulsively self-revealing stunt double, John Perry Barlow, arguably represent the left wing of this movement, as did Wells in his time. Gilder and Max Moore, founder of the extropian movement, represent the right wing. Old attitudes, PC left, or Christian right, as Rossetto puts it, are powerless to stop the new way. Step aside. And he is right. The characters represented in Wired are all utopians. Trust the universe, says Rossetto. And all corporativists, commerce is inherent in human life, says Rossetto. And all adhere to the same Wellsian tenets of no growth, no war, and no nations, although they are often confused into thinking that computers generate growth. It is at the level of these basic assumptions about society and humanity that we must wage a counterattack. This will not work by simply clinging to the past. Unless we can figure out what it will take to ensure the human use of human beings in a world of overwhelmingly automated menial tasks, we will be forced to concede the stage of history to Rossetto's army. What do we think? We are apparently confused and largely incapable of sorting all this out. This is the dangerous situation in which we find ourselves. As unpopular as Wiener's mission was in the 1950s, the mission of forcing a fundamental re-examination of premises which we only dimly apprehend and which we tend to religiously adhere to, even while we falsely believe that we are irreligious, is not likely to be a popular one either. Drawing the connections between ideas, their historical expression, and the eventual social consequences requires relearning much of what we have come to take for granted. Oh, it couldn't be so bad. Let's party. Or, where did this wacky conspiracy stuff come from anyway? Will be, and have already been, the common response. No wonder Rossetto is so smug. He has every reason to be. Without a theory that is even newer than Wells, Toffler, and Gilder, and their English forebears, we will not be able to generate an acceptable human future. Are we up to the task? What do we think?